Welcome back everyone. So today we're cracking on with my Pink Floyd inspired inlay, and today we begin work on the metal section. Now this is going to be one of those videos where you just kind of watch me work. Some people like that, some people don't. I would like to know in the comments below whether it is the kind of thing you enjoy, whether you feel it's too drawn out, too sped up, whatever. So the process is basically going to be to draw it out on paper, stick that paper to some metal, cut it out, and then inlay it up the neck. Simple as that really. So let's crack on. So there we have it. We're definitely getting to the point where we can think about inlaying these pieces in. Some of them will need a little bit of adjustment, particularly on the ends, to make them short enough so that they don't collide with the fret tangs when we put the frets in. But we're nearly there. The only thing left to do now is actually to inlay the thing. So I've got myself a 16th of an inch chisel and a 1/8 of an inch chisel, which is about the same width as the actual inlay itself, and also a scalpel. And we're just gonna make a cup of coffee, put some podcasts on and take it easy. The only thing I was a little bit unsure about was whether I was going to sort of glue as I went or leave it all to the end to glue in at once. I think I'm definitely going to at least do the first few pieces without gluing in, because when it does come to gluing, I do actually want to glue the prism in first so that I can get this piece of metal right up to the edge of the prism, and I don't want to be trying to do that with the prism glued in place because I will put a chisel right through it. So let's crack on. One thing you'll notice is that I'm using the method of drawing round the piece onto the fretboard before inlaying it. But as you can probably tell, when I try to touch it here, because there is not much surface area contact between the radiused fretboard and the flat piece of metal, it's just a bit of a nightmare for keeping it still. I'm not saying it's not impossible, but there are better ways to do it. So I've thought up a quick solution to that, and it's because we're working with aluminium. My solution is to take a piece of scrap wood that's been radiused to the same radius as the fretboard, pop the piece of metal on there, pop my radius block on top, and just give it a little gentle press in the vise. The good thing about aluminium is that it's not particularly resistant to bending. I'll admit that this is not really particularly healthy for the radius block, but never mind. Now that in itself actually will not quite match the intended radius because there's just a slightly springy nature to the aluminium, but what it's done is got it started bending so that if I try and bend it now, I can kind of just actually bend it with my hands more evenly than I would have done if I just tried to bend it from scratch, and where I would have probably ended up with a sort of a bend just in one place. There we go, and you can see even still it's not perfectly stable, but it does mean that it is just a little bit better, and it also means when we do come to inlay it as well that we've got less material to sand away. Now watch as I still mess this up anyway. Some people like to glue the piece down at this point just with a little tiny dab of glue, which is valid, but to be honest with you, I'm not really working at that level of accuracy anyway that it makes too much difference. I will probably have to tweak this several times as I carve it out, so just want to get the rough shape on there really. This is my first ever inlay after all. There we go. So I'll then follow that around with a scalpel blade and then use my small chisels to hog it out. I would like to know if there's anyone does this kind of work themselves and are quite experienced in inlay. Do you actually have a preferred shape of scalpel blade for doing it? I'm finding these ones, although they are very precise, they're a little bit too long and prone to straying, which are 10A apparently. Okay, so we finally hacked out the channel for the inlay. It's taken me quite a while, I must admit. It was my first time doing it. We've made a few mistakes along the way, and to be honest, I can see how the quality's improved as I've gone further along the neck. But thankfully, as I've said many times before, ebony is quite forgiving. So I've got some medium viscosity super glue, which is pretty much the same super glue you find everywhere. And I also have some thin stuff. I've got some ebony dust. And I've also put some tape along the edge of the fretboard just to try and stop any runaway super glue from the fret slots which go all the way to the edge of the neck. Yet another job I've never done before, but we'll see how it goes. You will see that I'm wearing gloves because ebony and super glue will stain your hands for days. I don't think it'll do you any particular harm, but it does get quite annoying if you have to go into work with black hands. Without any further ado, let's crack on. Really am flooding this, hopefully it is not too much. I do want to be sparing, but I also don't want to leave any cavities behind. Probably have overdone that a little bit, as you can tell by the stuff seeping out the edges. Not really too worried about getting glue places because it's all got to have a final sand. But that's looking okay. Do have here a little bit of ebony dust and a paintbrush just to try and force down into those cracks. Not worrying about accidentally filling the fret slots because I'm going to have to sort of recut them all anyway. I will keep setting the camera up on the right hand side of the work when I'm right handed. I shall try not to get in your way. But there were some little low points on the board where it either slipped with a chisel or whatever. I just want to try and fill them up if I can. It will look kind of messy, don't worry about that too much. Remember, we are going to have to sort of sand all this back to get it all nice and flush. There is a balance. You don't want to pile on loads and loads of dust and glue because it is surprisingly hard and takes a long time to sand it back. Just now applying a little bit of thin super glue to seep down into those cracks. hopefully that should be okay. I probably forgot to mention that when it comes to the fret slots, I've intentionally made the inlay ever so slightly short so that it's not right up against the fret slot. That is intentional, and that is so that when I put the frets in, I don't accidentally pull the inlay out. In some places I have gone a little bit extreme with that, but having eyed it up with the fret wire, it does seem to be okay. And then those 3 bits, I'm just going to give them a little bit of a light dusting. It might be overkill. As I say, it is a balance, but it's still probably better to have a little bit too much than too little. Being conscious of the areas where I know the slot was a little bit looser, more loose. I just want to try and make sure I get stuff in there. Okay, let's continue and get the whole neck done. So there we go. That's obviously looking fairly messy at the moment with all the excess still on there, but we need to leave that on because if we try and remove it, it'll rip out the stuff we do want on there. Notice that the prism has gone a bit darker as predicted. We'll have to see what that looks like once we clean it up. So we'll pick this up again tomorrow. So it's the following morning and that's hopefully dried. Obviously it's still looking quite ragged because I need to start sanding it off. But before I do that, there was one thing that I did yesterday which you didn't see on camera because, to be honest, when I reviewed the footage at home it was out of focus quite badly. And that is, I tried to neaten up this epoxy inlay that I did. As you can see, I've got a few sort of ragged edges which are really annoying me, and I wanted to see if I could try and tidy those up. So what I've done is taken a scalpel down the edge of this one as a test and then filled it in with dust and glue. You can hopefully see that that has neatened up the edge quite well, but it does mean that if I was to do this right the way along the neck, you would see a little black outline on the edges of the epoxy where I've done it. I would only do it on the black bits, I wouldn't do it on the colour bits because that would just create too many problems. But I think on balance it is probably worth doing. It is actually fairly standard that you might see a little black outline on your inlay if you check your mass-produced guitar, because there will tend to be quite a wide band of glue around the edge. So that is fairly normal and it's not really that noticeable unless you're looking for it. So I think I'm going to do that first because I don't want to start sanding this off and then getting a load of aluminium powder in the gaps that I intend to fill with ebony dust. So let's crack on and get that done. So that's now done. Apologies if the footage wasn't great, camera issues again. But now we just basically have to sand the whole thing back and see what we're left with, see if we need to try and tweak anything, but hopefully it should be more or less done. Just to try and speed the process up a little bit, I'm going to do a bit of filing. I'm just actually going to try and take some of this metal down closer at the fretboard, just to save the amount of time it's actually going to take sanding the thing. Well, that's the filing just about done. I've just done a little patch up there where I noticed there was still a bit of a gap. I'm actually really surprised at how well that has turned out. We've still got to clean up this end and see what it looks like. I'm now going to start going through the grit with my radius sanding block, and hopefully we should be more or less done. So there we have it, one, dare I say, completed inlay. It's taking me, well, I started this inlay probably a couple of months before the start of lockdown, the first ever lockdown for COVID-19, and I have just completed it today, which is what, May 2021. So yeah, as usual, things have taken me a long time, but hopefully you'll agree it was worth it in the end. Thank you for sticking with me. I do try and make these videos as entertaining as possible. One of the reasons that I've actually not released a video in a very long time is because I didn't want to just give you videos every week with tiny little incremental tasks in. I really wanted to get the whole inlay done, or at least what was left of it, in one video. So hopefully you agree that was worthwhile. Do let me know what you think in the comments below, of course, and I'll see you next time.